When you think of the island of Ibiza, there is one venue that needs no introduction as the most iconic institute in nightlife, where the epicenters of heritage, music and glamour have combined since 1973. For 5 decades, Pacha has been at the pulse of Ibiza's dance and cultural movement, where the cherries and the island of freedom go hand in hand. And this year they've been celebrating their 50th year anniversary, which is a monumental milestone in the notoriously difficult world of nightlife. In today's episode of the Mission Makers podcast, we're extremely lucky to be joined by Sanjay Nandi, who is the CEO of the Lio Group and former CEO of the Pacha Group. Sanjay's journey has seen him wear many C-suite hats, from Chief Operating Officer to Chief Development Officer, steering Pacha and the Lio Group through the ever-changing tides of the nightlife industry. Sanjay has been a true titan in hospitality for the last 2 decades, where he's led brands such as Horvada and Toy Room to unparalleled heights of success. And prior to the hospitality industry, Sanjay was a pivotal member of the Lehman Brothers Mergers and Acquisitions Department in London, participating in deal values in excess of $40 billion. We recorded this interview over the summer, just before the Pacha Group was split in two, and before Sanjay took on the stewardship of the Lio Group. In today's episode, we unravel the incredibly special layers behind a story that is a testament of the enduring spirit of creativity, entrepreneurship and passion that defines the very essence of Pacha. So, welcome to Mission Makers. We are sat in this incredibly iconic venue that once used to be the legendary Café de Paris, now turned into Lio London, which is owned by the Pacha Group. And I'm sitting with the CEO, Sanjay Nandi. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Very good, thank you. And it's great to have you here, and excited.
Amazing. We've got 1 whole hour of grilling. No, I'm joking. But you started your career working in Lehman Brothers in the M&A section. So my first burning question for you is, how did you make that transition into nightlife? Like, what sparked that interest to shift industries?
I get that question a lot, and to be honest, love talking about it. I mean, to be honest, as far as hospitality is concerned, you know, I grew up in India with my father, who was an admiral in the Navy, and you know, we used to host people at home, and so that's probably where I got my initial training in hospitality, like hosting parties, and then I did have a career in finance at Lehman and M&A, but it was more in the consumer space, so doing deals in pubs and restaurants, and then from there, sort of natural progression into private equity, where again we had investments in, I was looking after investments in restaurants, clubs, hotels, and then sort of came to the point where I said, this private equity is not really for me. I wanted to create, to set up businesses, to run businesses, to lead people, to really sort of create value in that respect. So I quit and started sort of restaurants in London, which is extremely competitive and great fun, but extremely competitive. And from there, sort of landed a role in Pacha, running operations, and then onwards.
Did you feel anything daunting about quitting, what you already knew and going completely outside of your comfort zone and switching to something completely different and new and, as you say, quite competitive as well?
I knew it was something that I enjoyed, and I had always, I guess, some sort of a desire to move into this industry. It's a very alluring industry because unfortunately, I say unfortunately, but it has low barriers to entry. So you can enter the industry, but that doesn't mean you succeed. So of course I was concerned. I took time off from when I left banking, and worked in kitchens. I worked at cafes. I've been a runner in a restaurant, and often would get questions like, "Oh wow, you're quite old to be a runner." And I said, "Well, change of career." And they said, "Well, you must have been really shit at your previous job." So But you get through all this, and it's all experience, it's all learning. So of course, it was daunting, and it still is, given the scale of what I manage now. But it's great fun, and I'm so glad I did it.
Brilliant, brilliant. So for our second question on this podcast, we love to go deeper into our guest's name and the meaning behind it. I know you saw all the questions before, but were you aware of like the meaning of your name? Yeah, absolutely cool. So for context for our viewers, the name Sanjay has roots in Sanskrit, and it's derived from two words, san and jaya. So san means complete and whole, and jaya means victory or success, which is quite fitting given what you've achieved, as a businessman. But how do you feel, that has related to your identity? Like, how has that played on you, growing up and that meaning?
Yes, I mean something I'm grateful for the name, for my parents naming me that way. But I have to say I am definitely not. That's not how I see myself at all. I'm more a process guy, so like I have, like rules and which change over time, but allow me to get through essentially a learning phase, and then moving to risk-taking phase, so that you get to the right outcome. Now, there's so much that goes into it. I mean, the closest analogy I'd have is, a few years ago, I was lucky enough to run the raising money. I was lucky enough to run the London Marathon, and that is 16 weeks of training, and the victory or the actual run is not that. That's not the moment that I celebrate. I celebrate the 16 weeks of training and everything that you put into it, which is, I guess, what everyone does. But that's more me, getting through those 16 weeks. And depending on, what the problem is, whether it's a business issue or not, it's all that prep that goes into getting to the right outcome. The outcome is what everyone else sees, but as you and I know, it takes a lot more.
No, absolutely. I'm sure you're familiar with the iceberg analogy, and there's that foundation and that depth, and that really is the journey. So talking of the journey and that incredible foundation, it's a really special year for the Pacha Group, because it is, of course, the 50th anniversary of Pacha, and I know that you guys will be celebrating all summer long, no doubt. But what an incredible milestone to reach, especially when you consider that, in the clubbing industry, the average lifespan of a nightlife institution is about 7 years, because it is so hard to sustain, running a club. And so the legacy Pacha has created is of course incredible, but it's also so iconic and so nostalgic on so many levels. When you think about the fashion, the AV, the music, how it's all evolved, and you look back at those, infamous pictures and videos of what Pacha was like in the 70s and beyond. But what do you think are some of the key milestones that have helped really shape this legacy and define this brand?
Thank you. I think we're all at Pacha really excited about achieving this milestone, and it's not just us in the that are in the company now. I mean, everyone who's been and everyone who's been involved, either as an artist, a dancer, or a client, customer. We all sort of celebrate together. So it's a really exciting time. I have to say, I mean, there are various moments in the history of Pacha that stand out. But before, in my role, my initial role as COO, so I was running operations on the island. I could tell what it meant to people on the island. So it was almost like it was their business, right? And they come up to you and say, "Oh, by the way, what's going on this year? Are you going to improve this or that? And by the way, how is that guy, the manager at the door, because his mum wasn't well? Is he okay?" And so it's a very local business, and it means a lot to everybody. And no wonder you hear, Pacha is Ibiza, Ibiza is Pacha. I then went from there to my role in development, so expansion of which I'm sure we'll talk about later, but expansion of the group, and I was even more surprised, because whether I was in Bali or Tokyo in the east, or Tulum or Cabo in the west, everyone had a story about Pacha, how they were there when they were 18. I think they said 16, but when they were there when they were 18, and all the special moments they had there, and how they bought like the T-shirt, the cherries. So it's usually significant for so many people. So it touches people in different ways. So, you know, for me to say, well, it's great because we have a new AV system doesn't really, you know, explain. I think there's some historical context to the journey of Pacha. You know, it was founded in started in 73, and those were the days where the founder, the legend Ricardo, and his brother used to travel to mostly London to to pick up the music, the LPs, and bring them back to Ibiza, and everybody would be waiting for, because they knew they'd be listening to new music. So this was in the 70s. I mean, in the 80s, it was more the Movida culture in Madrid, and you know, Ibiza was still like a small terrace with resident DJs playing for 6 hours, 7 hours. But the real sort of transformation, well, actually, then, like in the late 80s, the creativity of Pacha came to the fore, because they would have these iconic parties like Pelos Locos, which is crazy hair, then the beach party where the floor was full of sand, the Mr. and Miss Ibiza party, that locals used to die for to come to watch. And so there was all this sort of creativity where it wasn't really about the DJ, it was more about, where everyone who was present there was almost the artist or that everybody was coming to see each other, right? And then I think from the 90s and then the 2000s, I think that's when it became more mainstream, with big sort of record labels coming to Pacha and playing the music and seeing the reaction of the crowd. So it was the real sort of tastemaker of what was going to be successful, what was going to be released or not. And then, of course, in the 2000s, you had, Eric Murillo, Swedish House Mafia, David Guetta, etc. And that was like the big EDM movement. Again, at the forefront of the EDM movement. So, it happened first at Pacha. And then in the 2000s, I think, we pivoted further into sort of underground and tech and deep house. First with Luciano and then with Solomon, which, remains to date. So I think, it's not like it's a 50-year-old club. I mean, it's a 50-year young club, or like, it's constantly changing and evolving, and you can see that. Like you come to Pacha now, and it's on trend. It's it's very exciting, and so I mean, it's different things to different people. I think I know it's quite a broad question. So it's different things for different people, but we have gone through different phases over the 50 years, and can't wait to see what the next 50 look like.
100%. And how is like that relationship? It's really nice to you've sort of touched upon that local family feel. It was a farmhouse essentially in the beginning, and how has that sort of relationship sort of changed now with the island as well? Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about that. Where is it at currently? Do you feel like the governments are supporting? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the government has always been supportive, and we do our part, as do most responsible businesses. Anyway, I think that there are competitors in the market that do an excellent job, but like you said, we're sort of farmhouse to super club, but we're still a farmhouse, right? Like, and the others are more sort of big aircraft hangar style nightclubs, which is what you see like an industrial venue. I mean, not to knock them at all, but it's very different when it's like coming into a house. You walk through the kitchen to get to the VIP. I mean, we did a big renovation a couple of years ago during COVID, and the point was, okay, we're going to invest in the club. What are the things that we would like to change? So we upgraded the AV, of course, but we enlarged the size of the dance floor, so it was more GA and reduced the size of the VIP. So I always say, like, Pacha is more flower power than money power, right? So.
Great. Now, talking about, the nightlife industry, of course, it is a very difficult industry and there's so many things we have to consider, from the changing legislative perspectives, the consumer preferences. But in your opinion, at the moment, 2023, what do you think are the most significant challenges that the industry faces and how can we sort of navigate through that? If you want to hear the rest of our conversation, then head over to Spotify, Apple, or wherever else you get your podcasts.